You're watching the Retro Lube channel.
Closing time. This room won't be open.
So we have Jacob Slichter, the author of So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star and drummer for Semisonic.
After you recorded Closing Time and heard the demo for the first time, did you know that you had something really special in your hands? What was this all about?
When I knew we had something really special is when we finished our first album, which was called Great Divide, and it was a critically acclaimed commercial disaster. You know, Great Divide came out in 1996. We toured, everybody, oh, you're great, we love you, you know, and which is, you know, normal for record and music business people to say. I mean, they might honestly be into what you're doing. But for whatever reason, through a number of missteps, I think, it didn't catch on. Then we went back in to record another record, and we just figured, well, this is our last record. Because really, it was lucky that we even got a chance to make a second record after the poor showing of the first. By this point, you know, the record company had spent millions of dollars on us, and had, you know, just in terms of the debt that we had, you know, amassed that stood in between us and getting any money out of record sales, we were like at least $1 million in the hole. So when we went in to record Feeling Strangely Fine, we just decided it was an art project. We will just do what we want to do, and we'll see what happens in the end. And, you know, when we recorded Closing Time and Secret Smile and some of the other songs on that record, yeah, I thought, shit, man, this is, you know, listen to this. You know, you just play it back and play it back. That's what I would always do in the studio is, you know, you go out of there at the end of the day and you pop the rough mix into your tape deck and you're like, fuck, this sounds so awesome, you know, how can people deny us, you know? But I had done that through our first record. So, you know, there's a little voice in your head saying, remember, you know, you had grand thoughts of being a rock star your whole life, you know, get real, you know, so you're trying to sort of temper all this. We handed in the record, the finished record, and the record company said, we don't hear any singles, go back and re-record. So we thought about that, and you know, at this point you're thinking, wow, really? I mean, I could swear that Closing Time song sounds like a winner to me, man. That sounds like a single. You know, and Secret Smile, that sounds like a single, and you know, you're going down the list of the songs. And our manager said, you know, guys, don't go back and record, because I really think we've got the singles. If we go back in and re-record, they'll just choose whatever song we decided to make in the studio as the single, and then we won't have as good of a song. Meanwhile, at the record company, there had been a sort of changeover, and one of the new people was a woman named Nancy Levitt, who was this really ferocious, opinionated, not impolitic, outspoken person at MCA who came in to run the radio department. And she went into her bosses and said, you guys are nuts if you want them to re-record. They've got a single on here. It's Closing Time. It's a fucking killer, you know. And what she did was, and this was really the sort of the crowning blow of the whole thing, was she took the tape, the CD, across town to K-Rock in LA. K-Rock is like the reigning superpower, or it was back then, the reigning superpower of alternative rock radio. So if K-Rock gets on board with something, programmers everywhere are going to notice. Well, and they always add songs on a Tuesday afternoon. She went over there on a Friday and played for Kevin Weatherly, who is sort of like the man behind the curtain over at K-Rock, you know. Closing Time, he really liked it, and he added the song that afternoon. So, and this was before the CDs hadn't even been printed up or whatever. So, right there, you know, when I got the phone call at home, I'd never forget, I was in my apartment in Minneapolis, and I was sitting at my desk, and Jim, you know, I picked up the phone, said hello, and I heard a voice saying, K-Rock is adding the single. Fucking A. that's like, that was huge. And so, it took a little while for the song to get somewhere. They have these things called, radio stations do these things called call-out research. The idea being that programmers all over the country want to make sure that people are listening to their radio station. And they want to know if the people like the songs that are on the radio that they're playing. So they call people to find out. And they play them little snippets of the song, and they say to you, what do you think of this song? And what we found out was, what Nancy Levin found out was, they were playing the chorus where it's, I know who I want to take me home, over and over. She said, no, the hook is in the verse. It's closing time, blah, blah, blah. That's what people are going to remember. So sure enough, as soon as they switched and started playing people the other clip, they'd go, oh, right, that song. Yeah, I really like that song. And, I think the record came out in end of March. And the song hit #1 in the beginning of May. And stayed there for 3 months.
That is probably a very joyous occasion for any musician.
Yeah, I totally remember when we, because we had been sort of inching up, and Dan and John were not really plugged into the whole #1 thing. Because I think they had been through it before with their older band, they were just kind of immune to all of the hype. Whereas for me, I finally sort of got through the doors and was seeing this huge playground of the music business, and there's a little pedestal over there that says #1, and I want to knock a person off of it and get on there, So we were tracking. We would hear from our radio reps at MCA, hey, you guys are #5, it's looking good. You're #3, and we stayed at #2 for a couple of weeks, and then one night when we were in Providence, our radio rep comes on the bus and says, you're #1, and I remember pumping my fist like an obnoxious, all the obnoxious frat boy sports fans who I always despised. We went running around. Dan and John were kind of, I think, amused by my sort of whooping it up. And then that night on the drums, it's just every chance to launch a little bit of percussive fireworks on the drums. It's adding in a couple of extra things here and there, and Dan and John would just look around at me and just, smile because they knew I was so psyched. So yeah, it was incredible.
So these are the good parts of being in a rock band. Tell me a little bit about the not-so-great parts of being in a rock band.
Well, let me just tell you the finish to get to the very coolest part, which is playing shows when people know your songs. And a few weeks later, we played in D.C. at RFK Stadium at a radio festival. And we had been booked when the song had not yet taken off. So we were very early on the program. But, suddenly we're on the main stage, whereas a couple of years earlier we would have been one of the side acts. We're on the main stage. We're walking past our dressing room is sandwiched between the B-52s and the Goo Goo Dolls and Foo Fighters or whatever, and Green Day. So, now we're with the big bands, and we get out on stage, and we played our set, and people were pretty into it, and then the last song was closing time. And, the song sort of starts out quietly. It's just guitar and vocal for the first verse, and then the drums and bass and the whole electric guitar thing kicks in at the chorus. And when we hit that first chorus, I felt this tidal wave, this just whoosh of crowd energy that I had never been able to imagine. In all of my sort of teenage wet dreams of playing the drums, with the headphones on and you're ecstatic, whoa, I'm going to be a rock star, It just was no match for the real thing, which was just it almost threw me off the drums. And and you just would have that experience over and over and never got old. Never once did it get old. It was just great the whole time. So now the downside. Well, there's a number of weird downsides. There's things that happen when you're still at the top that are a little weird. You're doing interviews all the time. So we're doing this interview now. And I'm probably just a little bit more in interview mode, than my normal person. If I'm just hanging out, I'm probably a little more spacey. But here I have to be focused and have to come up with the right words at the right time.
You don't have to.
Well, okay, I don't have to, because it's you know, radio-free NY1. But the point is if you're doing interviews all day, then, you know, you come back to town and your friends want to hang out, and you realize that you've become this sort of interview-tron, this, like, Guy Smiley Muppet who won't shut his fucking yap, and who always has to have, like, the great little quip, you know, and I would start to just, like, ew, I don't like that about myself. And my solution was just to hide in my apartment and watch Sopranos episodes on, you know, DVD or whatever, and, you know, just hide away for 3 days and then get back on the tour bus again. The harder downside, though, was the expectations that you build for even more success, and then when your wave comes down, you know. And you know, with our next album, we were told, you know, of all of Universal Music Group's priorities for the next year, you guys are number 2. U2 is number 1. Semisonic is number 2. And I moved to New York. I started thinking about buying a brownstone, all that stuff. And then, sure enough, the radio did not add the single. And it was just miserable. It was miserable. What was really hardest for me was knowing that it was falling apart, even as we're getting all this media coverage, and our parents and friends are saying, "You guys were on Leno, you're on Letterman, congratulations! I'm just so happy for you." And you just don't have the heart to tell them, "We got about 3 more months at this rate, and then we're done." And sure enough, that's the way it went.
Well.
Closing